Welcome to the Bladtcast, our big season 2 wrap up of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Very excited to talk about the second season of this show. As always, I am Christian Bladt. Assembled before you, three of my favorite Star Trek fans in the internet, but also in the entire world. I've been in rooms with each of you, but never at the same time. Joining us is Drexel Hurd. Drexel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Always glad to be back on the bridge.
That's right. Please man your stations. And working the con is Jason Blair checking in from the USS Austin, I guess, and continuing the clockwise presentation for our audio. I think I just doxed you. Tom Kelly of the Tom Kelly Show. And so many other places. Oh, we're showing off now. Okay, well, we'll make sure.
Can we before we start the show mention for the audio people, mention what I'm wearing and then what Drexel did to one up me in the pre-chat.
Yeah, well, I think it's important, and Jason didn't get to see that part. So I have on a Star Trek T-shirt. It's from Comic-Con, I think, 2008. This is specifically for the J.J. Abrams Star Trek. It has the star date, the release date on the back. And it actually fits perfectly in the StreamYard rectangle. Tom got the old Kirk uniform out of mothballs. Whenever it's a fancy dress event, Tom always wears the Kirk dress uniform. And there's no fancier event on your schedule in the month of August than the Bladtcast. But Drexel, you showed that while you didn't get the memo, you do, I guess, win the biggest dedication for being a Star Trek fan. If you'd show our visual audience.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, it's a little
blurry.
But it is
a command tattoo right here.
Right. Wow. And all you need to do is add on to it, and then you can communicate with the bridge just by touching it on your wrist.
You know what? I actually am thinking about adding on down my arm, but we'll get to that because we'll talk about it in one of the episodes from this season. Actually,
specifically point out my irritation with Drexel. Drexel says when we come in, you and I are there. Drexel goes, well, I guess I didn't get the uniform memo, but luckily I have a tattoo.
Yeah, it's true.
Like suddenly then we were all underneath him on the fandom list.
No. I was just saying well, I guess I have something to be a part of the uniform. Actually, you know what? This shirt right here is blue and it has little stars on it. So I guess I
think that helps.
Not
to undersell Jason, by the way, you did come equipped with your Captain Pike hair.
So. Yeah. Oh man, that's the best compliment I've ever had. I love you, Christian. Thank you. You know how much I love that hair.
I do, and it is definitely working for you today. The Pike hair was out of hand this season. Let's be honest, and it was addressed appropriately, which I'm sure we'll end up talking.
I have a uniform, but it's 111 degrees in Austin today, and I'm not putting that on. So yeah.
And oddly enough, you're the I guess the two of us on the right side are the only ones that apparently have a hurricane warning in our future. Go figure. How crazy the world is.
The West Coast hurricane.
Yeah. Anyway, and it's too bad there's no jokes that anybody could make about a hurricane named Hillary. But anyway, Tom, what did you want to say?
Well, just one other thing that I thought was funny that you guys would laugh at about me wearing the uniform is the stripes are itchy on this cheap Halloween, and I'm just sitting there thinking, is that a 23rd century humble brag? Wow, all these stripes are so itchy for me.
Yes.
Ever since I made captain, my forearms are so itchy.
For TNG, it's like I got too many pips on my neck, and I think that my back hurts. Just from holding everything down. So let's do a quick summary for everyone. Let's talk about. And Tom, I know you were a part of it. Jason, you were a part of it last year when we talked about season 1 of Strange New Worlds. Just overall thoughts of the show after that first season, heading into season 2. Jason, I'll start with you. I'll do like a
Just
counterclockwise
overall
here.
comparing last season to this season.
No, just at the having watched the first season before this one started, where you were at, how you felt about season 1, and okay, now we're getting season 2, and your thoughts were.
I was super excited for it. I mean, I've been very, the problem is with after last season, I thought they could either keep it the same or they would go down. There's no way to really go up from season 1. So, I try to keep that in mind of, 2 can't be any better than 1, but hopefully it'll be at least as good. Now, I was excited to get on a show with Tom because I think the last time we've been on a thing was talking about Picard, and he's Mr. Grumpy Man, so I wanted to see what he could do to bring down everything.
Here's the thing about Tom. Tom loves Star Trek. I was going to say, unlike anyone that you'll meet, but the 4 of us are pretty much right in there. But Tom, lives and breathes it. I always point out that his now defunct AIM screen name was TJK 1701. And if that was still, an active email,
still my AOL email. If you want to know, if anyone wants to write me, go ahead. TJK1701 at AOL. It goes.
And I think that recent Star Trek product has not been Tom's favorite. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the last time you were excited was the last A.C. Crispin novel that came, continuing the Spock's yesterday's Sun series. But I think you liked the first J.J. Abrams. Is that right?
Okay, and you know what it is? I have liked the last time I truly loved Star Trek, beginning to end, perfect episode was First Contact.
Okay.
Now, I also, though, have enjoyed other aspects of Star Trek over the years. There have been times where I've had nervous breakdowns about it. And I treat pretty much everything made after Nemesis as fan fiction. And that's how I can enjoy it. I found the JJ thing was well cast, well shot, and awfully written. And this may be my problem with modern television. Honestly, I'm glad the writers are on strike right now. Obviously, my individual friends who are striking, I feel for you. But overall, there's too much crap out there, and there is too much Star Trek out there. But answering Jason Blair's little remark real quick, I enjoy Strange New Worlds. Now, I have notes if the creators want to give them to me. I think there's a lot of mistakes that I'm going to point out throughout the 6 hours of today's podcast that you will all agree with. But overall, listen, Picard was sloppy and poorly written, and I'll even argue with a couple of things poorly cast. That said, Strange New Worlds,
especially that slouch they got to play Picard. He's
the guy they used to have was so much younger.
You got a bell for that, Tom.
But yeah, I don't want to give all my thoughts in the first minute and dominate.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
But overall, I'm satisfied. I'll be honest. I'm satisfied. There are things that I think they could have done better. There are chances I'm glad they took, and there are chances that they took with the musical episode that I don't think paid off. But I was, But because it was true to Star Trek, I applaud them taking the chances.
Yeah, and we'll break down the episodes, our favorites, least favorites. We'll go through, the 2 biggest that really stand out, I think, from what people were expecting during the year. But I would say this is possibly, even in only 10 episodes, it's one of the most adventurous seasons of Star Trek television. Drexel, now you and I have talked. In fact, we were trading texts this morning. That's how it was like, well, we are doing the show if you can steal away for a bit. So I kind of know your general feelings, but just for our audience, talk a little bit about how you felt about the first season and heading into the second season, where you thought you were personally for your enjoyment of Strange New Worlds.
Well, I loved the first season. I think we spoke about it the last time I was on with all of you, and we were also talking about Picard at the same time, and we were talking about all the different versions of Paramount Plus's Star Trek universe. But Strange New Worlds just kind of as a standalone and as a part of the universe really is like top notch compared to the other. And I love Discovery, and I loved first season Discovery, second season Discovery. But Strange New Worlds really brings us back to the nostalgia of Star Trek that we're used to. And I think that's what I love about, I love a good prequel. And seeing how people develop over time. In this season, we, I know we're going to talk about, we got a chance to see, when certain characters that we know and love started to meet each other for the first time and how those things happen. And so I thought it was really cool. We have another Star Trek fan behind you, Jason.
Oh yeah, he's a big fan of Lower Decks. I can't get him to stop, which is a problem because he's 8 and all those episodes are TV 14. But he loves them.
But overall, I just thought it was a really solid season. I know there's a couple of criticisms when it comes to Borg versus Gorn, and I know we'll talk about that, but just how they're incorporating certain things, and hopefully they don't make the same mistakes that they did before in certain series before. So, but I just thought it was great, and I love Rebecca Romijn. I think she's really the linchpin of this whole. Like, I obviously love Anson Mount as Christopher Pike, but Rebecca Romijn's number one is top notch.
Yeah, no. She's fantastic, and yeah, to the point that Drexel's making, when we were texting this morning, basically I texted faster than you, where we were both had the sentiment of the Gorn are becoming this show's Borg, where you're like, okay, again. And not to undersell the story of the finale, which I did think was very well done and it's very interesting. But it's like, okay, all right, more Gorn. And then you always have to figure, like, how does the Gorn evolve into looking like the Gorn in the TOS episode where you could practically see the zipper? I'm just like, it's like the humanoid Klingons in Trouble with Tribbles and every original series, but we have to make allowances for the time-space continuum, as it were, and we will talk about all of it. One of the things that I think, and we will definitely touch on every episode in the season, but instead of going through and naming each episode, and we each, what I want to start with is we'll each talk about which episode was our favorite. And if you don't remember the title, I'll do my best to help you. I'm going to go first so that you can collect your thoughts and think about it. Before I had finished the season, I might have told you Tomorrow was my favorite episode. However, episode 8, Under the Cloak of War, dealing with something that they very rarely deal with in Star Trek, and that is the war of Star Trek. To turn our eyes to another universe for a moment, people loved the Star Wars series Andor because it dealt with sort of the impact of the actual war of Star Wars. And this was alluded to in an earlier season and in earlier episodes of the season. And it's just like, dealing with the Klingon War and people having to deal with it. That could easily been, an Andor style show. I'm glad that they kept it to one episode here. I feel like we knew Dr. M'Benga a decent amount last year. And I still feel like that storyline with his daughter trapped in the buffer, I was like, well, they really should have dragged that out a little longer. I felt like they just, resolved it too quickly, but we really got to know him this year. And I think he's a great character. And just sort of seeing him and Chapel, in the flashbacks and just dealing with it, this idea of the Klingon dignitary and the ambassador and the idea that, maybe he says he's changed, but I still want to kill him. And just the storytelling of the actual fight between them, where we're getting Chapel's point of view and we don't actually see what happened. And of course, she's going to stand by him no matter what, not just because she hates the person that died. I thought that was one of the best hours of Star Trek I've seen in a very long time. It was very well written. I do hope that they choose to submit that episode for the Emmy. You can submit several, but I don't know. I was just blown away by that one, and when it started, I wasn't starting to think like, I bet this is going to be my favorite. So doesn't have to be anybody else's favorite, but since I brought up that one, Jason, what did you think of that episode?
That's only your favorite because your old neighbor Clint Howard is in it, but
it's actually a great point.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw, by the way, he's still my neighbor. I
okay.
actually moved closer to Clint. I don't know if you know Drexel, but Clint Howard lives in Burbank. He and Ron went to Burbank High School. I ran into him in Vaughn's once. He had been on Dennis Miller's radio show. So I know Clint Howard fairly well. I do not know Ron Howard at all. But and for and I love how often he turns up on Star Trek. So you're right.
Yeah.
I thank you for keeping me honest on that, because I actually neglected to mention that might have been the moment where I was like, Clint's in this episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, finish your thoughts, Jason.
But I do agree that's probably the one they should submit for Emmy consideration. It's not my favorite, which we can discuss later, but it was very good. I would say it's probably my second favorite of the season. It reminded me of one time I was watching because I am a super nerd, I listen to the audio commentaries on a lot of the box sets of The Next Generation. And Ron Moore, the writer on Next Generation, was talking about how a lot of times people always talk about the bold stances that Star Trek takes. And he goes, actually, a lot of times we don't really resolve or advocate for one way or another. We sort of leave it up to the viewers, like the episode with the hermaphrodite planet, and they did sort of the gender conversion therapy and stuff like that. And he says people will come up all the time and say, thank you for advocating against that. And he was like, the episode really doesn't say one way or another. You fill in the blanks with your predisposition as a viewer on whether the show is advocating for it or against it. And I thought this was a great episode of that, because I think people that can watch it and be like, oh yeah, M'Benga definitely killed him and it was murder, and but it's maybe justified. And then other people say, no, they really did struggle. And that's always a great storytelling device that I think Star Trek is very good at. So that was I think a perfect Trek episode where it left it up to the viewer at the end of what really went down.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds me in the way you're discussing it, the first season episode where basically they had to kill that little kid to keep the planet running,
Right.
was another one of those where it's like, yes, to us it's terrible and it's wrong, but it is their society, and they sort of leave it more in that way, which I thought was interesting. Tom, what did you think of this episode? We're speaking of episode 8, and I hope that you're not just looking down at your thesaurus for trying to find 10 different ways to say hate or despise for each episode this season.
No, I mean, look, man, I have notes. I liked the episode. I don't know if I liked the way they did the ending of that. Sure. I don't listen. I think my overall problem with Star Trek Strange New Worlds is it doesn't have to be M'Benga. It doesn't have to be Uhura. They're trying a little too hard to use character names that we once used in new stuff. My problem with that episode was I think I would have liked them to be some form of forgiving, if not best friends at the end. To be honest with you, I'm glad you guys explained the ending, because that ending happened so fast. I couldn't tell if M'Benga killed him, who started the fight. It was confusing to me. Actually, that's the right way to put it. I thought it was just confusing to me, and I watched it twice. I would have liked a clearer resolution, and I didn't think M'Benga had to go on the peace treaty tour with him, but this was a guy who was arguably a bit of a coward and I liked the message of he was a killer who is now doing good things.
Right. And of course, the interesting parallel is so is M'Benga, I mean, he's like, yeah, I'm the butcher, and I was just, I thought there were so many layers to that, but I know what you mean. You're definitely telling a very specific story. If it's like, no, I'm not going to go on your tour with you. And if it ends more like, oh, let's do more sparring. And here's the moment where I could have killed you for real right now, but I'm actually not going to. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but it connected with me the way that they chose to,
it connected. It was powerful. I mean, listen, up until the last 2 minutes, that could have been my favorite episode. I just found the ending I genuinely rewinded to see if I had gotten distracted by my phone or something.
Yeah. No, what Tom is pointing at is the fact that if there had been songs in the last 2 minutes, but we'll get to that. Drexel, your thoughts on that episode that we're speaking of, episode 8?
Well, I mean, I think the original question was which episode did we like the best?
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah,
somehow
I presented.
Everybody got on episode 8.
I presented first.
Yeah.
So we're each talking about that one, and then we'll.
Got it.
Then we'll boomerang back.
I see.
So you're going to go next, actually, with your favorite. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this episode.
I will say something that I agree with what Tom was saying. The whole storyline gave me Half-Blood Prince vibes. Professor Snape being the Half-Blood Prince at the end, Mbenga being the butcher at the end, but there were some cowardly things that were happening where it all could have, I was like, oh, okay, so we got a bait and switch in there at some point. I thought it was a well-done episode. I, being a military kid, love any episode where we do see some not only engagement, but a diplomacy in action. I love that about Star Trek. I wish, to Tom's point, that it would have that wouldn't have been a bait and switch. It would have just made more sense had he just been the guy that we thought he was the whole time. I don't like part of the problem with a lot of these episodes is that they're trying to throw too much at us at one time because there's only 10 episodes and things get really kitschy and gimmicky, just like the crossover in Lower Decks, I loved it, but things you don't have to throw everything at one time. Mbenga didn't need a story. We already knew, if they were trying to wrap up or continue on, we'd already known his Klingon past. We had already known it. And they didn't need to hammer it over the head again by making him the butcher. He was already a part of that. They didn't need to give him a name. But I just thought the episode was great. I thought it was well done, and that's my thoughts on that.
Well, and now the boomerang does swing back. So what was your favorite episode of season 2, Drexel?
Oh my gosh. This goes back to my tattoo piece, and I said I was going to expand on that. Episode 2, Ad Astra, per Astra.
I know, and by the way, just to interject, you texted me after that, and I didn't see it for a month because I let's just say I've had a crazy summer, and someday on the show I'll catch people up on it. And I was like, oh, I'll write back to Drexel after I'd seen it, and I'm like, oh my god, it was so long after I saw it. But so that's that's number one's trial, is that episode,
yes.
Correct? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that was an episode that I watched twice because I thought it was so well done. And I think I've said this when I was last on with you, Christian, just about why I love Star Trek, because it embodies what so many things that we wish the world was like. So where we're constantly being a part of communities, and communities are coming together, and we're learning about so many different people, and then we always end up with a resolution that makes sense. And I thought that Una's arc, being a Valerian, that whole thing, understanding why she left, understanding that backstory, and then having the lawyer just barrel through this whole thing. I just thought it was just a well done. Actually, I think I teared up during her last speech because it was so well written and so well done. And I was like, man, that is good stuff. That is Star Trek right there. Give me all the war stuff all day. Give me all the other stuff. But if you just give me classic, clean, this is why Star Trek, this is why we love the universe so much, because we get to learn about so many different people, and they're going to protect their own. They're going to protect their crew and all their people at the same time, while at the same time learning about other people.
Yeah.
You just can't get any better than that.
No, and I mean, and it's a perfect example for what I said when we started, is just how ambitious this season was. This season wore so many hats. It's so many different kinds of shows, and it's very easy for that to not work and to not feel like the same show. But I think, as long as you space your stories out and, you don't go from legal drama to wacky half animated farce followed by, musical. And we can touch on all of those and we will. But I agree that one was incredibly well done. And the lawyer who actively disliked Una and still defended her is sort of one of those great interactions you can have in sort of any kind of legal drama of any kind. Tom, I want to know what your favorite episode was from season 2.
Well, I have strong feelings about, I hate, can I follow up on what you just talked about? The
Please.
Whole, I love the pieces of the episode. I didn't love the Una. I think this is my overall problem with the show is I want to be told what we're supposed to think a little bit. Like, I kind of like the idea of we should be careful with genetic engineering because you could edit out minorities. You can edit out people with handicaps. Like I love the Next Generation episode where Geordi's eye visor was the save the planet. Now suddenly we love genetic engineering. I'm confused by the moral of that episode. And I kind of liked Una better when she was just a tough woman. And also my problem with that episode was they never showed what made those genetically engineered people better or worse, or why Federation people would judge a genetically engineered person, what they're more resistant to
right.
COVID.
And let me just interject. And that's sort of the Star Trek thing about it is it's like, they're not super strong like Khan, not necessarily anyway. We don't actually know. And I think if they were to explore that in the future, that would help. I agree. It is like, I wonder what it is. But they were also, at least for that episode, it actually didn't matter.
She can turn blue and shapeshift into anybody she wants.
No.
Oh.
And she can marry Uncle Jesse from Full House. But I think you're getting your universes confused.
Oh,
because she marries the guy from The Talk. Yeah, get over it.
Oh, yeah. Right, Jerry O'Connell as well. Yes, exactly. So yeah, you gotta stay on target, Jason. Anyway,
but I did like that episode. That what I liked about this season was everything you just said you hated about it. Is I liked the standalone nature of it. If they came up with a bad idea, I knew it would be over by next week. So I really don't love. I don't love the Una genetically engineered plot. I really don't. And it was over by the end of it. I mean, I liked going and I liked taking the ride for only an hour. It wasn't my cup of tea, but it was over after an hour. My favorite episode is the Lower Decks crossover. It embodied, and it's funny, I can detach more for as upset as your fans know I was about Picard. I can tell you honestly what I like about, I can detach on that episode is it was part farce, but it was also part, it captured the magic of what I love about Star Trek. And like, there's for Jason and Drexel, I once met Leonard Nimoy, and I swear I'm not going to be that crazy guy saying it, but the Boimler Spock live long and prosper scene I did on air on The View. And I'll send you the clip later.
I've seen the clip. You're 100% right. And Tom, I want you to know, I did think of you in that moment, but already in the episode. I was just like, oh, this is like if Tom fell out of that portal.
Yeah, I mean, and it was, actually, and that's a great way to put it. Now, if that episode was, if any of us wound up on the Enterprise. Now, were any of us that starstruck by the Pike era people? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it was, and honestly, it was an okay sci-fi plot. Don't racially profile people with the Orions. And then it just had good, clean fun. It had a dumb ending that I didn't necessarily love, or not dumb. It was easy. It was fun. It made me think just a little bit on one or two things, like don't assume all Germans are prompt. I don't know. Pick your stereotype, but whatever it is, it was a sweet episode. And then, that was my absolute favorite by far. And you know what I liked about it too? It was over. But if it were 10 episodes of it, I'd be angry. I mean, you're right. I mean, look, a real Star Trek fan could nitpick it. Why are they animated here? Why are they not? Listen, I know there are guys on message boards right now going,
Uh-oh.
oh, does this mean they're in the Prime universe? I don't know. Let's put that on the side. It was a nice 1 hour. I watched it 3 times, twice by myself, and once while visiting a buddy of mine and his kids. And it was an episode that the whole family could watch together. And I don't think we've done that with Star Trek in a while.
I know Jason mentioned, his son loves Lower Decks. Like, I actually haven't watched Lower Decks. So I don't, I know I said there was like kitschy things that were happening and gimmicky things. Like, I loved the Lower Decks episode crossover, especially the throwback to the whole portal piece of it. Like, those are things that we've seen before, and like the history of all of that made a whole lot of sense to me. It's just like when you get it almost was like very Who Framed Roger Rabbit when you've got the or Space Jam. It was like, okay, like, yeah, people crossing over into Toontown or vice versa is a little. I mean, you can't get weird in Star Trek because it is what
funny that
the universe is what it is.
Tom, do you watch Lower Decks?
It's funny. I think it was this podcast that helped me enjoy it. I thoroughly hated it at first.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of detached from it. And again, once I treated it like a comedy and fan fiction, right. I loved it. And honestly, it's true to Star Trek. I mean, actually, my great joke on this podcast that'll never work anywhere but this podcast was when Gene Roddenberry first came up with Star Trek, he dreamed of showing Black women in positions of power. Sadly, that is on the 2 worst Star Trek series ever. Discovery and Lower Decks was the joke at the time. But it does. It embraces... it's self-referential. It's goofy. It's like, honestly, a lot of what's out in Star Trek right now is stuff I did in summer camp when I was 12. But, like, honestly, Star Trek Legacy, my summer camp buddies and I did a weird, TV movie, a VHS movie where we found the Starship Enterprise in a park,
But that's
also, by the way, Tom's summer camp was basically a week-long ponfar. I think it's important to describe there. But finish your thought. I'm sorry,
no,
Jason.
I'm surprised that they liked it so much because most of the humor, even though it was a Strange New Worlds episode, it was really a Lower Decks episode. The type of humor, they were making fun of themselves. Like, one of the things where they're like, when they're talking to each other, like, you know how they talk so slow here like 100 years ago? Is that so normal? It's because they talk so fast on Lower Decks because they're on, and so they're basically making fun of the fact that on Lower Decks they talk super, super fast. And it's like, well, if you don't watch Lower Decks, would you really get that? And so I'm surprised that you guys liked it so much, not having watched Lower Decks.
Well, I think they showed, and that's what I think made the episode brilliant, is they showed enough of the animation for you to get it. You got who it was.
Right.
You got that Tawny Newsome was the get in trouble ensign or whatever, or lieutenant, whatever rank she was. She was the head of it. You got that Boimler was starstruck and sentimental and yearning for stuff he read in the books. And you got enough from Tandy that, all right, where, Orion's endured some form of racism in the 24th and 23rd century. It was just enough, like it was long for a cold open, but it was just enough that you went into their world, and it was just short enough that you got out. I'll tell you 2 things that helped is Jack, what's the name of the guy who's the Boimler?
Quaid.
Jack Quaid. Listen, it helps.
Quaid's son.
It helps that Jack Quaid and Tawny Newsome are gorgeous, and they look like their characters enough. Listen, Tawny Newsome on Space Force, I have a crush on. And actually, if you follow her feed, apparently she does stand up too. I have not really figured out where. But yeah, I liked it. And I thought they kept, they were into it. Her is a badass, okay, that was cute. Okay. And you know what I liked about her? Like it's funny. I always feel like her is a little, I love the actress. I love that they're trying to do something with the character, but I hate that they're jamming in Uhura. But what I liked about them crushing on Uhura was we know Uhura and Spock had rich histories beyond that episode. Whereas you're right, nobody really knows what the hell An Noonien Singh is doing in 3 years from now.
Right. And, they also would clearly, I was just slightly surprised that there wasn't any reaction at all to her surname. So I have spoken about Lower Decks many times on this show. I have tried to watch it. I've watched several episodes. I have gone back and I tried to watch it. And Drexel, as I was saying to you earlier today, it comes down to, I guess, at heart, I'm really Vulcan. And when it comes to Star Trek, I don't like hijinks. Lower Decks is all hijinks. I'm not interested in hijinks. I don't want. I don't love the animated style. I actually really like this episode though. However, I don't really like Lower Decks. It didn't. See, again, here's the trick. I'm gonna go try and watch it again, mostly because I love their season 3 posters, a recreation of the Search for Spock poster. But I think it worked really well. I think that they did look very much like their animated characters, although let's be honest, Jack Quaid looked good 10, 15 years older than I thought his character was, but that's all right. We move on. It's the future.
He's a Quaid.
He's a Quaid. That's a great point. Yeah.
Meg Ryan,
and look, don't forget, Randy's got some of that DNA too. So, the Quaid DNA goes a lot of different directions. But I did like this episode. I was, for a visual audience, you can see I've got it as my background now. I did like the animated sequence at the end, and they tried to at least explain it. Like, boy, we drank something, So they didn't just have it wacky. But I thought it did work really well. I think that, yes, Jason, to your point, it is very referential of Lower Decks, but it's in the way of but how would we act if we were on even this Enterprise where, it's like, oh yeah, it's the guy from the menagerie who blinks twice, so it's still but we're 2 seasons in. I'm glad they didn't do this in the first season. I think we know these characters better. I do think that episode was a lot of fun, and there was only a little bit of hijinks in that episode. Lower Decks in and of itself, nothing but wall-to-wall hijinks. But that episode, the jinx were kept particularly low, and there is a hijinks episode in this season that I will talk about as far and away my least favorite. I do want to let Jason talk, but Tom has Tom's holding the talking stick.
By the way, I just raising my hand for 1 second. Every time there's a Spock and T'Pring episode, it feels like an episode of Three's Company. I just want to get that out.
Well, they do to the extent that they bring the Ropers in. And Stanley is very approach, but his wife, by the way, whenever he stays up late and pops in, hello, Craig Robinson from across the pond. Thank you for staying up late. I'm so glad that you're with us where it's almost 10 o'clock in the UK, unless I'm mistaken. So thank you, sir. But Jason, your thoughts on that episode, and then let's move towards your favorite.
Yeah, I like
if it's not that episode.
No, it's not that episode, but I was happy to see that they had the bug sucking on the nacelle like they do at the opening of Lower Decks. That was a nice touch that they did that. So my favorite episode, and we'll get a lot of eye rolls, but I think it really plays into what Tom is saying, is the musical episode. Is because I like that they take chances, and it's an episodic television, and it doesn't all have to be the same from week to week. And that's what I used to love the show Psych. I don't know if you ever watched that, but it's like they'd have a episode where it's our Western episode, and then it's our spelling bee episode, and they're all different. And that's what I loved about Strange New Worlds, is we've gotten so much into these season-long arcs. Everything has to have the same feel the whole season through, and they can go from a funny episode to a silly episode to a very serious episode. I mean, having the Mbinga episode in between the cartoon and the musical, I mean, obviously I think they did that on purpose, but it shows that we don't need it all to be great and to everybody's liking. And that's what I love about it, and that they took the risk, because there's been rumors of doing Star Trek as a musical on Broadway for decades. And I mean, once again, going back, there's stories of Brandon Braga saying they wanted to do like a musical episode of Deep Space Nine, and it, it got shot down by the studio. So it's like, let's do it, see if we can fit it in. Yes, it'll be silly, but it'll be fun and it'll be different. Ethan Peck had that auto-tune all the way up. He could not sing at all, but I mean, there were some really good singers on the show. And so to me, it was entertaining. And, at least they had some sort of semi-plausible explanation for what's going on. Because if you think about all the time travel and all the other stuff that happens, it's really no more silly than a lot of the stuff that we just take for granted in Star Trek. So why not take the risk, and kudos for them for doing it.
May I
go ahead, Tom.
The best thing I liked out of what Jason just said was the nice thing about Star Trek this year is they realize it doesn't have to all be great.
Well, for individual people, I mean, for people like me. I'm into music. I like to hear the people singing. I thought it was actually very funny when you've got Anson Mount being like, "Why are we singing? Why?" I mean, they're like referencing why this is so silly. It's not just like, oh, we're that old Norm Macdonald sketch on Saturday Night Live where they're doing West Side Story.
Exactly what I was about to reference is like, wait, because he was the only one not singing. Yeah,
right.
I think Robert Downey Jr. hosted that episode. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he's like, "What? Everybody's just singing, and they know what to sing." And I mean, they actually made that a point. Like, how do we know what we're all singing? So I did like that. I thought it was really fun.
And by the way, the idea of a Star Trek musical, I have been spending the last 2 minutes looking for this. I remember a Mad magazine that this came out probably the year I was born, but I remember seeing it as like at a used bookstore and buying the Star Trek musical episode of Mad magazine. And so that idea has been out there for a while. And Jason, I agree. It is a huge swing to try and do that, especially with a property that is as well established and as particular as Star Trek is. But I was going to mention that not only is Jason a fantastic singer, not only does Jason know his way around karaoke, but Jason released an album that I do have actually out of my office. If I had it nearby, if I'd thought about it, I would hold up the CD right now. Yeah. And Jason, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but let's just say at one point in your life, maybe a long time ago, your singing was not welcome at a place you worked, or at least by one employer.
Oh,
yeah. So
place that appreciates my singing. So.
Yeah, right. And that is my lesson to everybody out there: find a place that appreciates the song in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So
go ahead, Tom.
No, I just went through the whole hour hoping to hear this.
You have that loaded on your board. Yeah, I remember that novelty song. I remember that from Dr. Demento, the Star Trek. And so here's the thing about the musical episode for me, and that started my text chain with Drexel this morning, is that I actually didn't watch the finale last night because of the fact that I'm like, I got to walk away for a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's a midpoint in that episode. Subspace Rhapsody, episode 9. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Tom?
No. It took me three tries to get through it. Like I got 10 minutes through. I mean, I love it. And you know what I love? But you know what I found heartbreaking? And I guess it's a sign I don't consume enough media. Is what Buffy has done a musical episode. Psych has done a musical episode. Who else has done a musical episode?
There was an episode of Fringe that they sort of seem to have abandoned the musical portion at some point, but there's still songs in it. So it was definitely a little clunky, but yeah, people love that Buffy episode. That's a musical. I will say that I've actually never seen that one.
And apparently there was a joke in the Star Trek episode that I didn't get, but I caught it on social media, where they say, "Are we all going to turn into bunnies?" And like, I didn't know what that meant, but it's a reference to that episode of Buffy, the Vampire Slayer.
So there's a point in the middle of the episode where there had been several songs, and I'm like, oh, I hate this. And I actively, passionately dislike this. And Tom, a mutual friend of ours, Ron Mata, had posted when he watched, and I tried to get him on, but he's busy working in the middle of the day. But we'll try and catch up with him on the show at some point.
I think also going through social media was my favorite part about the episode because there were so many people that hated it who just were exploding, and I was like, I was reveling in it. So.
Ron is someone who loves, celebrates, and to this day still participates in musical theater. And when he had a problem with it, I was like, oh. So here's my point, though. That's the middle of the episode. When we got to the Nurse Chapel song, I was like, I want to continue hating this, but I didn't hate that. I liked that. Uhura has the solo song that I think is actually really well done, and it helps her story. And the reason it helps is it's just her. And then that one is supposed to be a big one. 2 characters singing to each other. That was driving me crazy. Mm-hmm. And whoever made the decision to not have La'an and Jim Kirk sing to each other and just have that conversation, like if he's singing like, well, her name is Carol, she's on the starbase and she's pregnant, I would be like, oh, come on. So whoever decided to not sing that scene, keep your job for season 3. You earned it.
Well, I knew Uhura would be a good singer because I think she was on Broadway. What really blew me away was how good La'an is as a singer.
She has an album. I follow her on Twitter.
Stunningly good. I thought the
raise your hand if you're shocked that Tom follows La'an on Twitter.
Yeah, I unfollowed her too. It was just kind of like whatever.
I followed her after the musical. I unfollowed her after the musical.
But she was good. I was like, wow, she can really sing. So
yeah. Well, go ahead, Drexel.
I first of all, I come from musical theater, so I appreciate a good musical anything, except this. Like, I appreciated this episode.
I love all musical except this.
I appreciated it for what it was, and I see how people, loved, hated it. They had a love-hate relationship with it. The best song was the opening credits, because they sung the opening credits.
Did they?
Yes.
I actually skipped it. I had no idea until you just said that, because I was trying to get through a few episodes at once, so I actually skipped it. I didn't even see that.
That Strange New Worlds has really let me down on it. I think we even talked about this on our season 1 recap. Is their theme song is utterly forgettable. It's a terrible theme song. There's no melody to it at all. It's just like da 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 da.
It's a remix of the old Star Trek theme. If you hear the tones of it, it's just enough.
At the end, they do that a little bit, but it needs a better theme song.
But let's also keep in mind that we can never criticize the opening credits of a Star Trek series after Enterprise. It is not possible, unless they get like another sound-alike. Yeah, if they get another sound-alike Creed song, that will be the time to criticize.
From there to here.
Yeah. You're actually really good at it.
Jason. And Jason's not even singing his Michael Jackson songs.
No,
you have no idea. You have no idea the talent up in that corner box, Tom. But everybody's trying to talk at once. Drexel, finish your thought, and then Tom.
I was saying, if you listen to if you're on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you listen to, there's an opening sequence version, and they in the episode, and they're singing that. That said, they did not use the one person who they should have used the most in this episode, who was a Broadway legend, and that is Carol Kane. There is no reason as to why Carol Kane.
I thought of one reason after you texted that to me. She may have not wanted to, because her voice is a little weaker than it was even in Scrooged. She doesn't sound like she did on Taxi, So, but I agree. Considering the aforementioned auto-tune, she does have a couple of lines in a couple different places, but she is definitely somebody that I think we were invested in enough as a character that they could have given her maybe not a whole song, but she could have sang like a verse. I do agree with you on that, by the way. I would have loved to have seen it, but my practical thinking was that perhaps she didn't want to sing too much,
Brent Spiner was just trying to figure out a way to get a Sung, who was alive at that point, onto the show. Dickie Sung coming out of nowhere to just sing a song. Old Yellow Eyes is back. I have that CD, by the way.
You have Old Yellow Ice's back.
I just wanted to make the Carol Kane point and then the opening number point. I thought the worst song, and I know somebody just mentioned the Clean On song in the chat, but I thought the Clean On song was just, I mean,
well,
they could have just, I mean,
you want to know what the Klingon song was? It was Antics.
Yeah,
he went and crammed some antics into a show that was already filled with musical antics. I know I've fallen a little behind on the chat. So before we move on to another episode, TL Stock says it seems to me there could be a little more congruity between the episodes, but I go back a ways with this franchise, not hating it all. Yeah, I think that somebody sent the meme, and I should have grabbed it. It was like a cover of one of the old paperback Star Trek books, and it was Jim Kirk, and the title of the book it was Pike looking at him and saying, "Why the hell are you always on my ship?" And there was a lot of Jim Kirk this season.
Jim Kirk, unnecessary, all of it.
And I think that it was like, remember, you still owe me that drink. I'm like, I know, that was 2 weeks ago. We know, Jim. Thanks. And Dominica Saxon, I watched some Lower Decks, didn't care for it, but not really into cartoons except Fritz the cat. Dominica Saxon, at least you're consistent. That's what I like to see. TL Stock also never got into Lower Decks. I'm a stickler with animation. I mean, you have to appreciate the Family Guy, Adult Swim, that sort of style of animation. But I know exactly what you're saying. William Walton, I was reading the other day that it was originally supposed to be Picard that got a musical episode, not Strange New Worlds. I find that incredibly hard to believe, sir. I am not calling you a liar. I bet that somebody wrote that somewhere, but oh no, I can't. You know what? I'm not even gonna let my brain go there. Because and then Craig says, think we had a lucky escape there, William. A ballad from Jean-Luc and Son. Not sure it would have hit the same. I mean,
there was a track on Old Yellow Eyes' back where Brent had Jonathan Frakes, Brent Spiner, Michael Dorn, LeVar Burton, Patrick Stewart singing with him. It's the roughest song on the album. So,
and by the way, Craig Robinson does remind me that Scrubs did a musical episode, and that was only a half-hour show. And one of the songs was actually pretty funny. But there's a JD and Turk song about how they're best friends. I didn't love that either. I typically, when I see there's going to be a musical episode, a lot of people get excited about those kind of things. But Craig was the one, Drexel, who liked the Klingon song. He thought it was a nice touch.
I didn't want to.
What I thought would have worked for the Klingons to do something musical would have been if it was like thrash metal, like Slayer or something, because they're so angry. I think that would have been like, okay, yeah, that tracks. That's how they process their emotions. But I guess they instead wanted it to be like, I don't know, this is who they all are.
I mean, at this point, they should have just had the Gorn a part of the episode. I mean, the Gorn, the little dinosaur, dinosaurs could have been out there singing.
It would have been like Spaceballs, the one that pops out. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You know what? If we're gonna do one last thing on the musical episode, what I wanted and was hoping for, was for the credits, the opening credits. Gene Roddenberry wrote lyrics to Alexander Courage's theme, and it turned into a 25-year lawsuit where for years, every time you heard any of the music from the opening of Star Trek, Roddenberry got a nickel too, even though the dime should have gone to Alexander Courage's estate. And I was really hoping they were going to sing
those lyrics.
Yeah, I pulled it and I'll sing it now, though I feel like Jason would do a better job. Beyond the rim of starlight, my love is wandering in starflight. I know he'll find star-clustered reaches. Love, strange love a star teaches. I know his journey ends. Never his Star Trek will go on forever, but tell him while he wanders his starry sea, remember me.
Now, where was that in the episode?
Why
So
did
here's
they
the thing.
put that in?
I don't want to go down the
Missed
rabbit. I
opportunity.
don't want to go to down the rabbit hole, but that was also done for the theme song to The Odd Couple, which everybody knows the music to that.
Really?
Lyrics were written because I'm actually, it's not Neil Simon. I'm not sure, but somebody was like, well, I want to get the publishing on that song. So, you know, a bad example would be MASH, because the MASH theme has lyrics in the movie. So that's like legitimately you have to, you know, everybody shares in that. But these were two instances, Star Trek and The Odd Couple, where the lyrics were written solely so that they could steal some royalties from the person who actually deserves it. Now, I'm going to put up a comment from the cut of the jib, but I do have to say, and Jason will understand the phrase, the cut of the jib, so you'll know what this gent is a fan of. We don't advocate any kind of self-harm here. And while I would say 9.5 times out of 10, it's not a laughing matter. However, musical episodes make me want to go into my garage, close the door, and start the engine and take a nap. So Cut of the Jib, I think, is firmly against
It sounds like Cut of the Jib loved the music.
But what I'm saying is I love episodic television. We've gone too far to these season-long arcs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. You know what I love about Cut of the Jib? I had an aunt say that exact sentence about how she's going to off herself at a Thanksgiving when I was a kid. So I just had a childhood memory there too. Wow.
You can find that on the Tom Kelly show. That'll be on an upcoming episode. All right, William Walton, I didn't want to dispute what you said, but you know, to do due diligence and correct. So William Walton double checked it. The thing about Picard almost having a musical episode was in an interview with one of the showrunners of Strange New Worlds. I never doubted that you read it, but if one of the showrunners said it, I think that whatever we thought about season 3 of Picard, we all would have liked it less if they had decided to do that. And by the way, Cut of the Jib wants you to know I'm not your aunt, Tom. So
I thought I just didn't appreciate the fact that we got the Lower Decks episode and the musical episode, and then something in between that. It just felt
I do think they needed to not go from one into the other, and then you know, putting that the war episode in between just shows like, well, here's the versatile show this is. What were you going to say, Tom?
No, because when I had David Bladt, the production designer from Star Trek Picard, on my podcast, The Tom Kelly Show. By the way, it doesn't count as a plug if you do it 45 minutes into another guy's podcast. But when
it does say TomKellyShow.com on the screen, so you know it's a constant plug.
I'm good, aren't I? Anyway, so back to me. But he had this big point, which is the problem with America right now is we haven't decided what kind of television we want to consume when we watch Star Trek. I want something that stands alone every week. If I go away for 3 weeks, I want to be able to walk away. And that's what I loved about Strange New Worlds. What he argues that I feel is incorrectly, but apparently Drexel, who knows more because he has a Star Trek tattoo. But Drexel just made a great point that there are people out there that want not just a 1 hour episode anymore, but a few episode experience, a flow, a playlist, if you will. And I don't know. Yeah. And that's, anyway, I don't have an answer to that. I don't even want to take a firm opinion. But yeah, I don't give a crap about the episode order. In fact, you know what I'd love even more nowadays? And you can't really do that with this Star Trek is I'd love to be able to skip around. I miss skipping around the series.
I think that they decided to have a few through lines. You know, you have Pike's relationship, you have Spock and Chapel, so you can't do that. And but maybe just in case somebody missed him, you've got Jim Kirk always reminding Lon that she owes him a drink. You know,
well, and that was the one on the like. Here's the problem: if you wanted to skip the musical episode, and you did,
I wanted to. By the way, I wanted to, but I knew I couldn't.
And they dropped a heavy bomb that I thought they were going to follow up on, and they didn't. I knocked up my girlfriend, Carol. That was dropped in the middle of an episode that I was very comfortable skipping. Right. You know, so I don't want a playlist anymore, or I don't know. But whoever it is, that Jim Kirk guy has got to go.
It is very interesting how the Lower Decks episode, you'd think it would be like a throwaway, but it really kind of wraps up a lot of the Chapel Spock stuff, because you've got Boimler letting her know that in the future Spock's going to go back to his Vulcan
stop being
self.
so emotional.
Yeah, and he's not going to be, I think she had her hopes up that he was going to embrace his human side, become more human and loving, and then Boimler basically
Tom's working
blew
on
that
some
up.
tech. I think Tom lost hearing us. But anyway, no. So that the Lower Decks episode was definitely significant because of that moment, and the musical episode is important, from a canon perspective, because obviously we talk about Carol Marcus in there, and the fact that that there's David as well. Now I'm going to bring Tom back. Tom, are you hearing us now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Huda wasn't working properly.
Yeah. Somehow Tom's Alexa decided to close hailing frequencies, which we never do here on the show.
Somebody made the comment earlier about congruity throughout the show.
TJ stock or TL stock. Sorry, TL.
And I love a good through line. I think we love about Star Trek is that you don't have to miss it. You can miss an episode and then follow back up. I think the recaps at the beginning are also very good. I thought that the Lower Decks episode and the musical episode could have been outside of the 10. Like, they could have just been add-ons. They didn't really need to be within the 10 because we only get a limited time. And one of the things that I mentioned to Christian earlier is, especially with the writer's strike going on, and of course we want to support the writers, of course we want to support the WGA and SAG-AFTRA and all those folks in our community, but we're not going to get another Star Trek based on what's happening right now. We're not going to get another Star Trek Strange New Worlds probably until 25, 26.
That's the thing. You guys are all in California, Hollywood, that's around you. Where I live, nobody cares about this strike. The moment it got real was when the "to be continued" came up on.
That's the first time it impacted Jason's life.
That's the first time. Before that, all I ever thought is, "Oh man, Christian's wife is a writer. I hope he's okay." But other than that, it never entered my mind until
as soon as that
"to be continued"
went up. I went,
man,
we're not
and
it won't be continued for a little while.
It's going to be continued and continued and continued. I do want to talk about the finale. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I did mention earlier that I do want to talk about my least favorite episode of the season. It's either 5 or 6. It's Charades. The T'Pring episodes drive me crazy. I do agree. Tom, you nailed it when you said
for a different reason.
When Tom, when you said it's like an episode of Three's Company, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Acknowledging that you don't like antics in the earlier episode doesn't free you up from having antics in it again. And oh no, Spock's stuck all human in some really convoluted way that doesn't make any sense. And but he can touch the hot teapot. That was my least favorite episode. So I was just like, can we take season 3 off from T'Pring?
No.
Bring her back in season 4. I know you love her, Jason.
I
right?
need more T'Pring. That was
you do.
I know you do.
Oh, wait, why did you like her, Jason Blair?
Oh,
have
you seen her?
Because seen her. But I mean, did you like I actually liked the first T'Pring episode.
It was okay.
It was fine. But again, it was okay. They didn't need to make it and I actually didn't mind. Again, they do things that are okay that we don't need to double down on and follow up on forever. And that was my thing is, you know what? 1 T'Pring was enough. I don't need a 3. I don't need, to your point, the Vulcan ropers coming in and solving it. I don't know.
If somebody wants to, self-animate, you take scripts from the Three's Company spinoff, The Ropers, but then put T'Pring's parents in those situations, I'll watch that all day. I would love to see that. And look, let's be honest. Somebody just needs to do it as a 4-minute sketch, and that's all. The concept will wear thin at that point. But I would love to see it. What were we going to say, Jason? Sorry.
I think our season 1 recap, we asked about what were the favorite things about season 1, and I said T'Pring because she's, for some reason, Vulcan women being emotionally unavailable makes them hotter, and then Pike's hair. Those are the two things I have a major crush on, and there were a lot less of both of those things in this season. So
I have to say that his hair was perfect every episode, though, and it was
but he
commented
wasn't
on.
in the.
I think
he wasn't
Boimler's
in
the one who
show.
mentioned it, right? He talked about like how
Yeah.
impressive his hair is in person. Yeah.
Are we at the point where we're giving overall notes? Because I feel like we're winding down a bit.
Well, yeah, I do want to talk about the finale specifically, but this is a great time to hear some overall notes, and we can comment on those. Yeah,
because one, you guys just had a powerful thought that had not occurred to me, which is there may never be a ending to the cliffhanger. There may not be a season 3, and that will take a lot of the joy out of this for me. That said, what I kind of wanted out of the series that I'm not quite getting is the last few seconds of the Discovery episode with Pike, where that last scene where you saw number 1 in the helm, you saw Spock at the science station to the left, Pike was in the center seat. What I really wanted to see that I'm not getting, or it's becoming a little too wacky and silly, is I wanted to see less of a background cast and more of Pike and number 1 mentoring a young Spock. And what I don't like about them playing with existing characters is, it does detract a little bit from Spock's 30-year journey with Nimoy playing him, when you could say, well, wow, for a guy who looks like he didn't know how to experience feelings until after Star Trek: The Motion Picture, God, you'd think that guy would be a little more well-adjusted if he sang in a musical, or had a day where he was half human.
You remember seeing him with was it a guitar or a ukulele in This Side of Paradise?
The lyre.
So yeah. So he has his moments, but I know what you're saying. As you add on to the canon and the backstory and prequels, you do start to sometimes be borrowing from the future, and it can sort of lessen some of those moments. I don't know that I'm feeling that, but I can see the case that can be made for that. Yes.
I find the series gets me angry enough when they get into fan service. Now, I don't mind them playing with the Gorn, because then I would be saying, well, I never heard, if they created a new alien like we did in Enterprise, I'd be saying, well, why didn't we talk about this on Star Trek: The Next Generation? Why are we talking about the Suliban? Whatever. Right. Why have I never heard Captain Picard talk about the Suliban? Fine. I don't.
That is the voice I use when I read every tweet I've ever read of yours, by the way, Tom.
Yeah, and it is. I do grok Spock. I watched that clip on TikTok this week. Big ending to my thought here is I'd like it to be its own show. I think they're trying too hard with the guy who plays Kirk. He's not Kirk. He's a fine actor. He just he's on. I find him to be borderline unlikable, which maybe that will be the 21st century interpretation of Kirk. I thought Chris Pine was a better Kirk than Shatner was in some ways. I thought he had the Kirk gravitas. Maybe the writing had him as being a little bit of a buffoon. This new guy, Paul Wesley, he's just like, I mean, like, I wouldn't bang him in an elevator. If I were a green woman, I wouldn't hook up with him. Paul Wesley.
That's because you weren't a fan of the Vampire Diaries. Is
that what he was in?
Yes. My wife wandered into the room, was like, oh, I didn't know he's on this. I'm like, well, he's not really. And she's like, I'm like, he plays Kirk. And this is her understanding of Star Trek. Well, if he plays Kirk, why is he not on this show? I'm like, you know what? I got to finish this episode. We'll talk later. God
damn it, you're supposed to be a writer. You're supposed to know these things.
Yeah, look, I think that I think that the episode where Kirk worked the most was Tomorrow, which I do want to talk a little bit about, because that I thought was a great episode. Not just because they utilized their Toronto shooting location instead of trying to pretend it was New York or something. I appreciate them for that, but also, I think that was an important episode for La'an character wise. That was the perfect way to give us him. We popped into all. Time got messed up. So then we had Kirk, and this is what you were speaking of earlier, Tom. Is there's Dana Carvey and his I Grok Spock shirt. from
why
a sketch that one of us thinks is really funny and the other one does not, but we don't have time for that. What were you going to say, Jason?
There is no reason that Spock would exist in that reality if the Vulcan world and the Earth world never met and they were enemies. Like, Spock would not exist, but they still had to throw him in there. So
yeah, no, look, it's not yeah. I mean, I guess if he's all Vulcan and not half human, he's not really Spock. I do agree. But I thought that one, you know, I knew before I saw it that it was like, oh, this is the City on the Edge of Forever episode, you know? And I mean, that's one of the best scripts, despite how Harlan Ellison felt about the televised version. I do think that hour was fantastic. So I liked that one. I thought that it checked off a lot of boxes. I did like when you have a character that's old. That was a great spot for Carol Kane. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm going to know you in the future. Yeah, I know how old you are. I like stuff like that. You know, it's like, I'm going to go find Doc Brown back in the 50s, you know, because he'll try and help me figure it out. So there was a lot of elements that I liked. I thought seeing a young Khan in the room was potentially horrifying. So I thought it was really well done. I want to stay on the topic of this. I got to make a note because I don't want to forget about something. But what were you going to say, Jason?
It is that whole thing when people say, "Would you go back and kill baby Hitler?"
Yeah.
You know, and that's like the whole thing. Like, would you do that? And it's like, yeah, you'd say you'd do that, but like, if you're sitting there looking at an 8-year-old kid, are you going to blast him in the face?
Well, Jason,
no, but you can hire somebody to kill baby Hitler. But you know, I know what you're saying.
My episode description that did not work as a TikTok, and I deleted it, was, "Would you kill baby Hitler if he were your great-great-grandpa?"
Oh boy,
that's how I described. No, but that's what
Tom, I don't know that you get TikTok. It's supposed to be dancing, isn't it?
Well, then the question
is, would you kill baby Hitler?
Does the time frame work like it does in Back to the Future or in like Endgame? It's got that whole issue.
Yeah, I know. Can you kill your own grandfather? Anyway, I think that was again, we're talking about the versatility of the season and the different kinds of stories, but I want to get your everybody's thoughts on that episode because we're probably not going to touch on some of the other ones, but I want to know what each of you think about that. Let me ask you, Drexel, the time travel alternate reality tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. What did you think of that story?
I thought it was a fun episode. I think that they're overutilizing La'an in the series. I think she's just a character that's like Tom said earlier, like we're not gonna, like, who is she later on? Like she's not, like, this is a prequel to Enterprise. We're starting, they spent a lot of time in this season setting us up with, like I said at the beginning, with the characters that we know and meeting them, and they're all meeting for the first time or whatever, and how that goes down. But like, for her to try and travel back and then to Kirk, it's like, what's the point of having a love story with La'an and Kirk? Like, what? Like, I don't see the real, like, what's the purpose of that? And she's a security officer, so like,
yeah, no, I think it only exists for her to be like, oh, look, I opened up to somebody, and then just to like, oh, and I finally talked to him about it, and then I got shot down because he knocked up his girlfriend. I agree, though. It's like they use it basically for that reason, but there's enough with her where I don't know that we needed her to. But to be fair, if you're going to suspend the disbelief that he looks like an actor from Vampire Diaries, if he is Jim Kirk, you feel like any woman that's in a proximity of him for even 10 minutes is probably going to fall in love with him. I mean, that's the track record that I've seen anyway.
Yeah, and that's fine. And it's almost like, with his brother, like, it's like, which story of Jim Kirk do you want us to know about?
Yeah.
Right. And because we already know his history. Yeah. We don't need new things to be made up about Jim Kirk throughout the story.
No. Although, by the way, the finale is when I was convinced that Sam Kirk was going to finally die. When he's like, "Oh, I'd like to go back down to the planet. I know I couldn't handle the Gorn last time." We'll talk about that episode in a moment. I'm like, "Oh, okay, so he's going to die." And still time for Sam Kirk to pass on. I think Tom, you haven't gotten to weigh in specifically on that episode. I don't know if you have any other thoughts. before I have a specific thought, and then I want to talk about the finale. But what are you sitting on, sir?
Well, just somebody said this at the beginning of the podcast, how much they love Rebecca Romijn as number one. And that's one of my problems is I think there's so many characters, and just you guys have just proven a point that was made earlier in the podcast, is there's too many characters on a show that's only going 10 episodes. And a lot of the lines could have gone to Rebecca Romijn. There is no need to expand on Jim Kirk. You're right. We know he's the one guy we know enough about in Star Trek.
It's true.
And yeah, and I secretly had a conspiracy theory that Rebecca Romijn only was paid, like they couldn't afford Rebecca Romijn. So that's why they moved her station to the side. So she'd be off camera. I'd love to see if that theory is correct or not.
I mean, maybe she asked for like, one less day of shooting an episode. Maybe, you might not be wrong about something like that.
There's something going on there. And then listen, and it's the old thing of lip service. Do I need it? Like, listen, there's a guy with the last name, like we've used this joke in the podcast before, the New Jersey Hitlers. Hitler had a nephew or a second cousin who lived in New Jersey, and they changed their last name before 1940. You're telling me 50, literally 200 years later, is someone going to have the last name Hitler? No. Yeah. We had a neighbor named Hittner. He was Jewish, and we still called him a Nazi growing up. Wow. I mean, it was close to Hitler because it was close.
I think you
get what I'm saying?
You just have an anecdote from the Real Housewives of Massapequa, Tom.
I'm sorry. That was really into a sidetrack.
But I do agree with you that, most of the episodes of the series of Star Trek that we've watched, they have a cast of about 7 characters, but you forget, the Next Generation was 26 episodes. And so you could have a couple Worf episodes and a couple Troy episodes and a couple Dr. Crusher episodes.
But you'd even go on to have O'Brien and Reg.
Right.
And Ensign Rowe, but you
10,
can't do that with this show.
That it's too much with 10. I do like the runtime. Some of these episodes are like 70 minutes, like they're over an hour, which is kind of pretty epic. But 10 episodes is not enough to be spreading out stories, because you're right. I want to see more Captain Pike. I want to see more Spock. And La'an, she's a great singer. She's a good-looking lady, but I don't need her to, I don't need 3-4 episodes dedicated to her.
Her character is not that different from Una, where I'm convinced we need them both. I do, and I hadn't really thought that until we talked about it. I'm like, they are very similar, and a lot of their lines could actually be interchangeable.
My favorite La'an line, actually, I needed to share this with real human beings for 1 second. In the Lower Decks crossover, they're like, and the old NX-01, it was a great little Enterprise. It had the grapplers. They don't care about grapplers. Then she just goes, I love grapplers.
I actually thought that was great. I love that she said I love grapplers.
And who we've not even mentioned this whole hour is Ortegas. I mean, it's like, okay, she's
a great pilot. But we've gotten a little bit more of her this year. I agree, but they haven't really delved into her. What were you going to say, Drexel?
I was going to say, Tom, if who was non-human that you shared that with? You said you wanted to share with humans, but who did
Tom, you may not know this, but Tom is best friends with Tweaky from Battlestar Galactica. So he calls him up and he says, "Beady, beady, beady. Hi, Tom." And then he tells him what he thinks about the latest sci-fi.
Well,
that's right. Nobody expected to get a Tweaky drop here on this show.
I have 4 friends watching anything Paramount Plus in real time, and they're all on this chat right now. Enderman is Saxon, who only pops into my world and then goes out.
The new Beavis and Butthead when they're old is amazing. I love that show.
I've watched some of that. Yeah,
it's really good.
Exactly.
I think it's an important conversation, and like Tom said at the beginning, maybe if the writers are watching this, maybe they'll take some notes. But what we loved about the first season and what we were given, that was what we were sold in the first season was Pike and Una. That's how we were sold this series. That's who this was going to be about. And then it became it's like when, and I'm a big fan of The West Wing. It's one of my favorite television shows. And it's like when West Wing was being created, it was supposed to be about the president, or it wasn't supposed to be about the president. It was supposed to be about with the staff. And then, once they were like, oh, it's Martin Sheen, let's just make it equally about the president. And then some of the staff in that, like, this is where second season Strange New Worlds went, where it's like, okay, this is less about Pike and less about Una and more about these random characters. And that's fine if that's the way that you want to do it, but that's not how you sold it to us.
Well, I kept hearing every review of, well, how come we don't have Pike? Oh, he had a baby this year, and so they scheduled things around him. And it's like, okay, it's 10 episodes. Like, I know you got to go up to Canon and film stuff, but it's like,
is that why there's less Pike on this?
Yeah, that's all I heard. Like, he literally said he had a baby that was supposed to be like right around the time of the second episode, and so they're like, yeah, we'll just, which actually makes me wonder if that tomorrow, a plot line was originally written for Anson Mount, and then the idea is she comes back and she's working with the captain that she's slept with in another universe, and it's all weird.
That's fair.
But I'm like, they really couldn't schedule around his baby to shoot this a little more and get him into more episodes?
Jason, not everybody has all three of their babies at once. So sometimes and I can't imagine how difficult that must be when you have them all at once.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to take time for the baby. And then there's another one that shows up later. Whew! All of a sudden you're like, what happened to the last 5 years? But I know what you're saying.
Right.
But I felt like we got a good amount of him, and I actually hadn't heard that. Sometimes you get the feeling that like somebody must not have been available, but hopefully season 3 will get more of him. I do want to talk about the finale before we wind up in about 10 minutes, but I made a note because I wanted to make sure we talked about something that was teased in season 1 and not a whiff in this season. Cybok. And nothing about Cybok this year. And I was kind of excited to pull on that thread from season 1. And for whatever reason, we don't have Sarek. They said like, oh, the two of you aren't talking. So is that actor busy? And, I don't know that part of it. I should have looked it up. I kind of forgot.
They just want to feel our pain of not having Cybok.
Look, I want to give them another chance. I want to do over on Cybok, so far. But I mean, they teased it and I'm like, oh, that'll be so cool to kind of deal with it. And then it's like, nope. Anyway, if anybody has strong thoughts on Cybok, you can jump in. But let's, there are other episodes that some I liked, some not as much. The Lotus Eaters, which is the one where like, oh, I've got a headache and I can't remember who I am. It was okay, but that's the kind of show I don't want this to be, where it ends after an hour and I'm like, oh, good, it's over. I'm like, no, I kind of like the ones that I think about. I like the fact that even though I was mixed on the musical, I needed to think about it. I had to process it for a while. That was very disposable, a couple of those episodes. But now we're stuck thinking about this finale for a very long time, where once again, we deal with the Borg. And the two relationships of two of our main leads come into play.
We deal with the Gorn.
The Gorn. Yeah.
You said the
Gorn.
No, but you're calling them. But you said Borg, but I thought you were making a point that.
I thought you were making a point.
Well, in my head, I was going to say this show's Borg, but then so then I just tripped over it. But because the Gorn are lizards, and because the previous episode of the Bladtcast is an interview that I did with Kenneth Johnson, who was the creator, the writer, director of the miniseries V. So you can find that the previous episode before this one on the Bladtcast on the audio feed. I have to say that I did like the homage of the giant ship hovering over the city, very much out of that series, and been swiped a number of times, most notably in Independence Day. But in any case, I think that I felt like that was a good episode, but man, it's like that second Spider-Verse movie. I want to know that something's not ending when I'm invested in it. I don't like a big to be continued, especially not for the season finale, because like in the old days, like, look, Picard gets kidnapped by the Borg and we meet Locutus. All right. We'll see in like 3-4 months.
3 months.
That's all we got to wait to see how that gets undone. This, you were talking about it. It's like easily 2 years, maybe 3. Who knows? Maybe never. So that part's frustrating. But how did everybody feel about the way the season ended? Let's talk about the finale, the Gorn, not Borg episode. The title is Hegemony, and I'm like, hegemony.
Well, that's what the Gorn word. That is, if you read the books,
Hegemony.
The Gorn. If it was the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Empire, and then it was the Gorn hegemony.
Okay, the Gorn hegemony.
The Kardashian Union, like that was their word of. Now, what is a hegemony? If I knew this was coming up, I'd define it. Maybe I'll pause and pull the phone up.
It's my favorite Billy Idol song. Hegemony. Who knew there was going to be so much singing? Probably everybody. Drexel, what did you think about the way that the season ended? Let's not hinge on the fact that it was a cliffhanger that'll take years to resolve. But
yeah, well, aside from the Bourne, that's what I'm gonna call him.
The Jason Bourne.
The Bourne. I thought it was. I thought the welcome of Scotty.
Yeah.
Was a welcome new character. Like I said, I mean, if you're going to throw all the characters at us and they're all going to meet in one episode, you might as well just throw everybody on the ship at some point. But or they could have saved him for season 3. It really didn't matter. I mean, he could have been a season 3 character. But then again, we might not get a season 3. Who knows? I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting episode. Anytime that the Gorn are on, I'm always a little confused because they don't talk they don't say anything, and I don't know what their mission actually is, and so somebody might have to like explain that. Like I get the old stuff, but like in this new world, they're too far advanced. They're really advanced, and it's like what.
Yeah, no, I mean, and La'an references, having been held on the breeding planet, and if the idea is they take over any planet they come across and turn it into a Gorn breeding planet so that there's more of them, that would make sense. But you're right. The Borg, the actual Borg, they assimilate. We get it. We get the Klingons. We get that too.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
I think when you have a series of fans who've read the books or who watched it, who've been a part of this journey for decades and decades or whatever, when you have a new show like this, you have to explain things. And I don't know that they explain the Gorn well enough outside of La'an's story arc to where this finale, to where they should have been the cliffhanger in the finale. Like I was like, okay, well, and now they've got all these ships. It's like, okay, are the ships more powerful? There's a lot going on, and a lot was not explained in that. I mean, we still got a little bit of Chapel and Spock's relationship, which sure. And then, more was Jim Kirk in this episode?
Not in this episode. This is one of the only ones he's not in, actually.
Yeah. But I also loved more Carol Kane as a teacher. Yeah. Okay, so she's okay. So she's got Una, she's got Scotty. This is where they came from. This is where they I like that. I wish that was an episode before. We got a little glimpse into why she's there and who she is, and we needed more of that. If you're going to introduce a new character like that, we need more of them in their story arc because we already got La'an's story in the first season, and now you've got a new character, and we barely got to see her through this season. And then at the end, she's like, "Oh yeah, you were my student. You were my best student." Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you always got the worst grades. Yeah, I know we touched on her, but I do think Carol Kane was a great addition because we don't see nearly enough of her, and I think that they made her character work. It was definitely a little abrasive in the not the pilot, but the season premiere where she starts walking around. I'm like, all right, I guess this is a loud guest star, but then we got enough of her where I feel like it worked. Jason, what did you think about the way that the season ended with a return to the Gorn / Born / Borg of the future of the past?
So you've given me an idea, which I'll talk about after, but my whole thing with this is it just reminds me of because you're right. With Best of Both Worlds, we had to wait like 3 months to the next season. And it's like, why do we have to do shows like a year and a half out now? I mean, I know there's, the sets are bigger, the effects are better or whatever, but it's like, why are we in this world where we do 10 episodes and then it's a year till the next thing? I mean, do you have to? So now I immediately start thinking, yes, I know the strike will make it even further, but say there was no strike, I would still not be happy having to wait a year for this thing.
Yeah.
Can't they do mini seasons like they do with Bluey? How they let, they'll drop like 8 episodes and that's a part of a season. Here's the fall episodes and then here's the spring episodes. I'm a little surprised to hear you all say maybe there won't be a season 3 because, I mean, they've really made this the face of Paramount Plus.
I think at the very least they would resolve this storyline in a movie. You know what I mean? Like a TV movie. I mean, but yeah. I would be surprised if there isn't, because one, honestly, the main reason is that Paramount, as CBS All Access when it launched, they were convinced that they could launch their own streaming service because of Star Trek. Because they knew that the 4 of us and so many like us will pay for it. And they did have slightly more ambitious plans where it was to have very few weeks where there were no Star Trek series so that you would keep renewing. It's sort of what Disney Plus tried to do. It's like, well, when your Marvel thing ends and your Star Wars thing is on, and then this, they make it where it's very easy to cancel it now, especially if you don't care about Lower Decks. But I do believe this story will be resolved. I would assume that they'll find the money. They'll figure it. All these actors are locked in for probably 5 seasons, if not more, because there are only 10 episodes. But look, your complaints, by the way, about the short seasons and the time, you're a lot closer to understanding the writer's strike than you think you are, because your complaints as someone who watches the shows exist for the people who are working on those shows. And they're like, getting on a show used to mean that you'd get to write 4 or 5 scripts. Now it might mean 1. And but look, here's the thing about, as much as we love TNG, imagine if they continued and they did like 10 episode seasons. And there's always some stinkers in your 22 to 26 episode shows. And it doesn't go. It's like it's like Lorne Michaels always said about SNL. It doesn't go to air because it's ready. It goes to air because it's Saturday at 11:30. And it's the same thing with scripted dramas. It's like, it's probably not ready. I mean, I worked on Law and Order SVU. People love that show, but it's a conveyor belt. It's like. You want to talk about episodes where all the characters aren't in it. They would have to shoot 2 episodes simultaneously and split the casts up because they're like, we can't keep up with the schedule. So it's frustrating on a lot of levels. We will get Discovery at some point, but I think that's really it in terms of what's already done.
We get Discovery in March.
I don't know when they're probably going to slow it down.
There's nothing else in between that.
Lower Decks. Lower Decks is for those who celebrate. Lower Decks is there. Yes.
But I mean, my question is like, though, the turnaround time. Because they're like, they were about ready to start shooting episodes in May. Well, they were talking about those episodes won't be able to drop till like next, summer. And I was like, really? We're in a world where you shoot a TV episode and it's not ready to drop for 11, 12 months.
Let me make a point. I'm sorry, Tom, I'll give you in a second. But we've been talking for a little bit more than an hour and a half now. And you know what we haven't complained about once? The effects, the CGI. And that's a big reason why this show takes a long time. Because I honestly think it looks really good.
It does. And the weakest part is actually the opening credits. The Enterprise looks like a cartoon in the opening credits. It looks better in the actual show. But
what were you going to say, Tom?
On 2 points. One, the problem with the SAG-AFTRA strike, and I say this as a SAG-AFTRA member, is the hard work that those on strike are doing, not going to work, going to these protests and shutting down productions. The problem is the general public will not feel the consequences of this hard work until a year and a half from now, maybe 2, long after the strike has been hopefully
it's
settled.
not like a trucker strike where their Amazon package isn't coming
I did a whole
right?
if you're like when the firefighters in New York City went on strike in the 70s, it lasted 6 hours.
Well, and then also, in New York, when the when the sanitation goes on strike, it does not last more than maybe a day or two. When the trash bags are literally piling up on the sidewalk in New York, you do immediately see that. And here's what I'll say though is, no, the strikes aren't going to fall into, immediate repercussions for people in our demographic. What about our parents, or God bless any of you who have your grandparents who all watch CBS and procedurals and all their shows? They're used to them coming back in September. They're the ones who are going to be like, well, where the hell's NCIS? Where the hell's FBI? Where the hell's Chicago Fire, Chicago Police, Chicago Hospital? I forget what they're all called, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
but
I don't.
Those are the shows that you're going to feel. The people who watch network television, and they do exist, they're just not, people in their 30s, 40s, or maybe some of us almost in our 50s.
Listen, I talked about a lot of this on my own podcast. I just did my strike episode, and the short answer is I think and I include myself as a SAG-AFTRA union member, this is important. Don't send me any hate mail, please. I think the problem with this strike is they ramped up production. They knew this was coming, and they were getting ready to starve the working man and woman out. Like right now, they produce. I mean, there are 5 different Star Trek series on the proverbial air right now. There's a bank of content that they've had ready to go. I still haven't seen Stranger Things seasons 4 and 5 or whatever the last 2 seasons are. I think they're ready to ride this out for a while. And that said, there's no real. I thought the unions should have gone after Oppenheimer and the Barbie movie. We should have done boy asked America to not go to the movies that are coming out right now.
Well, and I did see an interaction you had on Twitter, Tom, and
with Mike Royce.
The reason why you don't do the boycotts is because when it doesn't work, it makes you look weak. So yes, that's why they're saying no, don't. We're not telling people to cancel Netflix, cancel Disney Plus, cancel Paramount Plus, any of those things, because not enough people will do it. In places in the country, there are not that many people. No, let me put this the reverse way. There are plenty of people in the country who are actively plugged in and follow media and follow news. They don't obsess about it, but who don't even know that there's these strikes. And so that's why, that's the only reason. If it would be effective, I think they would say, yeah, get rid of your Netflix. Although, to be fair, my 5.5-year-old Lucy says she will not watch Netflix until mommy goes back to work. We didn't say anything to her. And I was like, are you going to finish? She likes a show called Rainbow Rangers on there. And she's like, no, not till mommy goes back to work. I'm like, all right, clearly they pay attention.
Good kid.
Well, I mean, that's going to work in probably Los Angeles, but I can tell you here, nobody even probably knows there's a strike. And even if it was like in the news, like Hollywood actors tell Americans don't go see Barbie, that's going to mean every American's going to say
no, because
go see Barbie.
We got to almost an hour and 40 minutes without me mentioning this name, Drexel. No, you've got Ted Cruz telling people to not see the Barbie movie. But anyway, we should turn the page from that.
One thing I was just going to say, just to circle into the Star Trek realm, is because what's going to happen is, and this is just across the board, strike across the board, which is, there's stuff in the bank that the studios are going to pump out. But what gets people interested in these things that are in the bank, outside of reality television, because they can do whatever they want to do, is the promotional stuff.
Yeah.
If they don't have the actors, like they can have their likenesses to put billboards up and stuff like that. I think it's a lot harder when they're not doing interviews, and they're not doing TV, and they're not promoting, and they're not on social media, and they're not doing what they would normally do to promote the shows and promote the movies. Nobody's going to be like, people are going to be like, I didn't even know that movie was coming out. And for Barbie and Oppenheimer, like, Barbie had $150 million marketing budget, and they got that in pretty early. But then you have the Oppenheimer cast, which Oppenheimer was already something that people were going to go see anyway, walking off the carpet the first day of the strike. So it's like, Now there's nobody, whether or not it's the Star Trek cast, however long this goes on, Star Trek Discovery will have its fans that will go back to it, that will know that it's coming. But people who might be interested, there's going to be nobody to promote Star Trek Discovery, however long this goes on.
And to Drexel's point, that's why Sony was like, yeah, we're going to, they announced it. We're like, we're putting pause on everything except for Gran Turismo because they'd already started the promotion for that. They just tried to they tried to finesse well, these first 2 weekends are going to be preview weekends and then the actual release date is moved. But they, the next Spider-Verse sequel, it's off the schedule entirely because it's animation and they need to get the voice actors to work. And if they're also SAG-AFTRA, I guess they don't. So, and yeah, in past strikes, when there was just a writer's strike, they made the talk shows go back to work without writers. But because there's a SAG strike, you can't have Jimmy Fallon on there.
No, you can. It's a weird strike. And now this is where my union, where the WGA is a better union than SAG-AFTRA. And I know this just from reading what I've put a lot of effort into knowing what I can and can't do from just my own ethics. SAG-AFTRA isn't the nice thing about the WGA is if you're a union writer, you're on strike. You are not going to work. You're in SAG-AFTRA, you're on strike. But unless you want to do a daytime talk show, unless you want to do a soap opera, unless you want to do certain commercials, and unless you want to do film productions and news people. Good Morning America. And let's not even get into the radio personalities who are also not on strike. Dozens of separate contracts. So it's really just a cool kid who are on strike.
They can do it. The actors can do it, but they can't promote anything.
They can't promote.
They can go on those talk shows. They just can't promote anything.
So let's bring it back to Star Trek. They just had the big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas, and you had cast members who are SAG-AFTRA members. So you had a meet and greet with Ethan Peck and Zachary Quinto. They could not talk about Spock because Spock is a struck work, and you could get your picture with both of them in street clothes. They weren't going to wear the uniform anyway, let's be honest. But it is very complicated. But it look, even if technically under the letter of the law, you're allowed to do it, most people aren't. And yes, they can't promote that struck work. So, if Paul Rudd wants to do a podcast interview about the book that came out that was supposedly written by Scott Lang from the Ant-Man movie, and I know the actual writer, but it's there's a lot of gray area. But most people, there's somebody that I asked to be on this episode, somebody who I've talked Star Trek with before, and they said that they really weren't sure if they could talk about Star Trek during the strike, so they'd be happy to do it another time. And I said, it's fine. No hard feelings, nothing like that. So it's difficult. And yes, it's why it's more cut and dried with the WGA. But this is what people tuned in for was union talk.
And then my last point, you asked about the show, and you gave me an idea when you miscalled the Gorn the Borg. I was like, and then early on the show, you're like, well, how are they going to explain how they look now versus how they look when he fought Kirk? Yeah. Which is stupid because it's, the zipper. Have it where the Gorn get assimilated by the Borg, and so their eyes get replaced with those stupid mesh things. Those are actual Borg implants, and Kirk is fighting a Borg Gorn. There you go.
Nick, you call him the Gorg.
No, those are the bad guys from Fraggle Rock. So you see, then it gets confusing. Jason, let's get you on the phone to Kiva Goldsman, and we'll get a memo. We'll get it all tightened up after the strike. Anyway, this was a great season of Star Trek. This show, I've been happier with the 20 episodes than as a whole anything else I've gotten on Paramount Plus, anything in a long time. This feels like Star Trek. Some of those other shows definitely have episodes that feel like Star Trek, but there's weeks where I'm like, I guess. And I think that I appreciate that they take big swings, even though I didn't love the musical episode. Having an outlet like Paramount Plus where you can try that and you don't have to worry about air quotes, the network saying, you can't do a musical episode like they would have for DS9. Although I guess technically that was syndicated, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, in general, I'm happy with it. I like these characters. I like the crew of this show almost immediately because some of them were established characters. Discovery, it was a bit of a slog for me to come around. And then just as soon as I finally like somebody, they write them off the show. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Discovery. In general, I would say I'm happy. Drexel, I want to give you a final thought, and of course, anything else that you'd like to bring up before we wind things down for real.
No, I'm excited about the a potential third season. Cliffhangers, it reminds me back in the day before we had like binge watching TV, before we were binge watching TV, like, we had to wait a whole a whole year before we got the fall season again, or just a few months before we got the fall season. So it's a little reminiscence of that. History always repeats itself. I thought, overall, like I said earlier, the season was a lot of fun. I'm excited to see what characters we're going to meet in the third season, and how they take our notes from today's episode
and
incorporate them into the next season. And hopefully, one of two, hopefully people are not only supporting our SAG-AFTRA partners and our WGA members, but also hoping for a peaceful and quick resolution to the strike, because it is affecting almost every part of Los Angeles.
Yeah, and not to put any pressure, my kids got to eat. Come on now, but. It's reminiscent. It reminds me of not knowing how long it'll be until the show comes back. It's like having to wait from the age of 4 to 7 to find out, wait, is Darth Vader really his father? Or is he just saying that? I mean, what? He's got a sister? What the? So yeah, I haven't felt like that in kind of a while. But I think that, hopefully, all these things go back into production. The lithium crystals are fully restocked, and
all I'm saying is they can drop 4 episodes as put it out on time. Give us the back 6. They don't all have to be 10 in the can, ready to go.
Wow.
When they serve these up.
What is the better business model, though? Imagine if they dropped all 10 of these on like a Thursday at midnight, Friday morning at midnight, like Netflix used to always do.
Right.
I think it helps to continue the conversation, except for when you fall woefully behind like I did this year.
The worst is going to be if the special effects folks of the industry go on strike. That will really shake some things up in the industry.
Well, then that'll turn into hope you really enjoyed the legal drama episode, because we're having a whole season in a Star Trek courtroom. No phasers allowed in here, sir.
Texas is a right to work state. Everybody move on over. Let's go.
I'm going to go with, I hope the special effects people go on strike, or I don't really, but if I were giving you my closing words and tagging it onto what you guys just said, is if the Star Trek Strange New Worlds and all of the series writers were watching this right now, my advice is just remember, a little less can be more. I did not love the last episode. I really didn't need to see Spock on a space jump. I didn't understand how the whole crew at a Cayuga died except for Nurse Chapel. That was confusing.
Tom, it's because she's important. That's why she lived.
Fine.
It was the USS Red Shirt. That was the name of that ship.
Yeah. And I'll argue my favorite episodes of Star Trek were actually the ones we talk about are the ones with really the least amount of money spent on special effects. I mean, if you really think about it, Star Trek 2 was one of the lower budget out of the first 5. Because they reused the sets from the motion picture. The models were built for the motion picture, and they really just broke things, and then they had to pay to fix it all in Star Trek 3. I'll even argue with the original series right now. Balance of Terror. You never saw the other ship. What a great way to write a high-end space drama and say, yeah, there's another ship out there. You just can't see it. I mean, brilliant, simple writing. And I would love to see Star Trek get back to that. And I think they did with the Lower Decks episode, though that's a bad example because of the animation. I'll argue the courtroom episode was high drama. And even the one La'an Goes Back in Time, which might be my favorite one of the season, despite my notes about it. But they reused they went outside in Toronto, to your point. Yeah. So that's my overall thought, and maybe not necessarily with my analysis, or maybe with my analysis now, less is more.
By the way, you reminded me of my favorite line in that episode. It's just a casual throwaway. It's a major city in what used to be Canada, so it's like they're saying like, well, yeah, obviously we know it's eventually going to be like Sirius XM. Okay, at some point it's going to be US Canada, we know. Anyway, always fun to talk about Star Trek, and so glad that the three of you went on this voyage with me. But now it is time to take the voyage home. But let's promote Drexel. Anything you want to encourage people? Obviously, if they can message you. But I want to give you a chance if there's anything in particular you want to leave the people with.
Well, leave the people with all I kept thinking about is, do you hear the people sing? Because Les Mis is Hear the Pantages.
It is the Pantages, I know. Yeah.
And so, like I said, I mean, I think I said most of everything. People can follow me at Drexel Hurd because I do most of the political stuff. That's where Christian and I started. I was just talking to Chelsea Galicia, who was just over at my house the other day.
Oh.
And we had dinner the other night. But for those that have watched the Trump report and have now skipped over into Star Trek world. But like I said, I think that I'm ready for this new season. I'm ready for Star Trek to come back.
Sure.
I really hope that we get some Michelle Yeoh at some point. I know that's who you were referencing.
Wow,
Well, yeah, no, I mean, they very quickly resuscitated that Section 31 show.
That's probably what they should have been doing for the past year, but she was off doing another Agatha Christie movie that should drop next month. But I'm not on here often. I'm happy to come back anytime. But
yes, please.
We're ramping up in the election time. So I think that's going to take up certainly a lot of my time, but very excited to come back on as often to talk non-real stuff.
Yes. For people who don't know, Drexel is the campaign manager for Mayor Quimby in Springfield. So do I hear a briefcase opening?
To do to get that man reelected.
We need Quimby. We want him on that wall. Jason Blair, you're not really on social media anymore. I mean, you're on Facebook, but you're probably not going to add somebody that watches the show on there.
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Pleased to announce that I just got named by Best Lawyers Magazine as Best Lawyer for Trademark Law in Austin, Texas yesterday. So
congratulations.
If you have copyright, trademark, branding issues, I can represent people all over the country. I'm not limited to Texas law. So Jason Blair, I'm at Smith, Gambrell, and Russell.
And you've reminded me that I did promise you we would do a copyright and trademark.
There's a new case that court just ruled on whether a guy ripped off Lord of the Rings, and it's so awesome to hear an appeals court talk about how Aragorn is different than Hobbit Town, and it's beautiful.
I kind of like that. Well, as someone who I believe was recently on the front cover of Best Podcast magazine, Tom Kelly, let everybody know where they can find you.
Oh, my podcast is at TomKellyShow.com. And to Dominicus, thank you for showing love on my YouTube channel, Tom Kelly Show. I am inspired by my time here today, going to try to do a TikTok with me singing the Odd Couple lyrics. I have pulled them up, and I'm going to give credit here because now that I know there's a trademark lawyer in the room, I better share as much credit as I can. No matter where they go, they're known as the couple. It fits. It fits, people. I've been reading it the whole show. It fits.
We can't wait to see it.
I know. I can't wait. And I know I don't need to actually install the TikTok app to watch that, so I will just watch it on my phone. As always, I am at Christian DMZ on X and on Threads. It's so hard to promote yourself when they keep coming up with dumb names for everything. I don't think Threads. I'm going to promote Threads forever because
you're on ecstasy right now.
Yes, that's why it's been such a long.
That's how we got through the musical episode.
That's what it took. And you can find me, Christian DMZ. I believe our next episode, my pal Will Sterling and I will talk about the Blue Beetle movie, which we're going to go see on Wednesday. So we'll talk about that. And of course, subscribe and see the backlog of recent episodes. We've covered a lot of movies this summer and shows like this one. So please subscribe there, and please follow over on the Who Are These Podcasts Network, the new show that we just launched. Who Are These Broadcasters, which is Tuesdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we basically find a lot of clips and we laugh, we have fun, and nobody learns anything. But you can find over there, Who Are These Broadcasters? That is all the time we have for now. We'll see you next time on the Bladtcast. And as the great Spock would say, live long and prosper.